What if what we call public opinion was just a manufactured narrative that makes it easier to convince people that if their views are different, then there's something wrong with that, or there's something wrong with them?
Spending is a tax. As soon as the government spends money, eventually it's a tax. Sometimes we put a direct tax on the people, sometimes we borrow the money, and sometimes we print the money.
Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth.
The Patrick Riggins Show. And now your host, Patrick Riggins.
Just too young to care. That's what we're fighting each week here on the Patrick Riggins Show. Too young, too old, too rich, too poor. It doesn't matter. The government will reach out and touch you no matter your age or income level. And therein lies the problem of not caring. The people in government are active every day of the year violating your constitutional rights. If you don't stand up for them, then who will? I can't carry the water by myself for this movement towards more liberty. We all have to work together to get this government turned around. To those who don't care, who say the job is too great, I say you're a quitter. You're not a true American, because Americans don't quit until we've reached our goal. Let me get back to that thought in a minute, though. You're listening to the one show on the radio dial constantly fighting for freedom and liberty. Not just for me, not just for you, not just for Americans, but for everyone on this planet, the Patrick Riggins Show. The beacon sending forth our message is the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network, and here locally we excite the ether on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. But getting back to my point, that Americans are not quitters, unfortunately we're being taught that quitting is okay, that giving up is okay as long as you get some small morsel in return. Winning isn't the goal, but giving a good effort is. That's BS. When did the government ever settle for less than it wants? Never. But we're supposed to when it wants to limit our freedom yet again. When we have people in Congress fighting for our freedoms, but it involves shutting down the government, well, then they're just supposed to give up their fight. These congressional representatives take an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. The president does too, but we've already seen he doesn't care a thing about that document nor keeping his promises. But should someone in Congress actually take that oath to heart and try to stop something that's unconstitutional, they're derided and told to sit down and be quiet. Stop making waves. Just let the government do what it wants to do. Doesn't matter whether it's legal or not. And just for future reference, if the power isn't listed in the Constitution, then it isn't legal. We sit out here and we're supposed to just let the government do whatever it wants. Get everything it wants, not put up a fight. But the minute we try to take back some of our freedom, do something against the government's wishes, we're told to stop fighting. Stop making trouble. When are we going to tell the government to stop fighting us? Just look at the recent government shutdown. The whole bureaucracy tried its best to make things as difficult as it could. It fights us every time we ask it to reduce spending. It fights us every time we ask it to bring our soldiers home. It fights us when we complain about this insane war on terror. It fights us tooth and nail on just about every issue, unless it happens to agree with us, which isn't very often at all. Have you stopped to think about all this lately? Have you thought about how the government is no longer our servant, but our master? That's not how the Constitution says it should work. I know we don't teach this stuff in schools anymore, but you can read it for yourself. Notice that 99% of what our government is doing is not listed as a power, which makes it illegal. Let's say you hire someone to mow your lawn. At first, they take care of it pretty well, and the price is reasonable. But after a few months, the bill starts getting more and more expensive, and the quality of their work goes way down. Would you continue to still use them? That's what happened with our government. Let's say you have a talk with the lawn people, and they say, look, you don't have a choice. You have to use us, and you have to pay our bill, whatever it is. So you say, well, I'll just mow my yard myself. You know, lawn people don't like to hear that, so they'll tell you, well, we'll put you in jail if you do. So you have to use their lawn service, and you have to pay their bill, no matter how expensive. Now, how is that fair? How is that right? That's what the government is doing to you. You have no choice but to give it the money it wants. If you fight it, if you decide, hey, I'm not going to pay, then it will bring people and guns and make you pay. Or they'll take your house and land and sell it and get its money that way. Now, would you put up with that? No one would. But here we sit with this exact situation on our hands. And we're told to stop fighting. Stop being a troublemaker. Just let the government be in charge. We even have people supposedly on our side that say this. Just let Obamacare go through. Let it wreck the economy. Put God knows how many people out of work and make health care substandard and more expensive to boot. Yeah, do all that and maybe the government will learn its lesson. But it won't. It never does. Look at all the failed government programs that we have, and they're still around. These people in Washington, well, they're bordering on the psychotic. We have psychotic people representing us in government, and you don't want to bother to do anything about it. You're too busy. You're too tired. In the meantime, the government is going to continue ruining our country, and eventually it will hit you. The only problem is by then it probably will be too late. Real quick, too, this is on my mind because of this weekend. Speaking of this crazy stuff the government does, daylight savings time is this weekend when you set your clocks back an hour. Is it just me, or is this not really ridiculous? The government says we have to change our clocks, and we willingly sit out here and do it. Does this not just seem a little robotic to you? We have electricity. We have lights. We have heat. Why do we need to be adjusting our clocks back and forth? To me, it's almost like a test each year to make sure the population is still staying compliant. It's like a big joke. See, we said change our clocks, and they're actually doing it. What suckers? You may say, but Patrick, it saves energy. No, it doesn't. The United States Bureau of Standards has done multiple studies which show the energy savings are non-existent, nowhere to be found, negligent, or negligible. We're being negligent in letting the government tell us what to do in this way. The savings were so small that it was well within the margin of error. It also wreaks havoc with a lot of people who have difficulty adjusting to the time change for one way or another, either mentally or physically. Yet, we continue to march to the drumbeat of the government. It doesn't matter if there isn't any reason for what we do. Doesn't matter if it's hurting people. Just keep marching to the drum. Keep your head down. Don't make trouble. Don't rock the boat. Don't speak out against Obamacare. Don't speak out against the government. Don't do anything that would separate yourself from the rest of the sheep of the country. If this is how you feel, if this is how you think things should be done, that we should go along to get along, all I've got to say is the Germans from the 1930s and 40s would be so proud of your devotion to the motherland. We're up on the first break here of this hour. Stay with us. Yes, we hear the bell tolling. It's tolling for us if we don't do something. Stay with us, and when we come back, we'll talk a little more about this devotion to all things government. When we come back here on the Patrick Riggin Show on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network. Welcome back here to the Patrick Riggin Show on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network. Playing some of the best bumper music on the radio today. For you listeners who remember the 90s, this is the band live and their hit song, actually, Lakini's Juice. Interesting bit of trivia on this song. It wasn't released as a single in the United States, but still reached number one here. Well, don't ask me why they didn't release it here, but I guess they had their reasons. Still reached number one, so I guess they got paid either way. Anyway, getting on with the program. You're listening to us here locally on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. Wanted to be sure and get that in before we get going. Continuing this line of thought from the first segment, that being this devotion, this unthinking marching to the beat of government. I've ran across a good column last week talking about this very type of thinking. And I've got it right here. Okay, it's by Chris Rossini, and it's over at the website economicpolicyjournal.com. economicpolicyjournal.com. And it's a blog, I believe a bunch of different people write for. It came out last week, but the message on it is timeless. It's entitled, Americans Suffer from Baby Elephant Syndrome. Now, the column starts off with a picture of this huge, big elephant chained with this kind of a small chain to this little wooden stake driven into the ground. And the column states, take a look at this picture. Just by eyeballing it, do you think the elephant can break that chain if he wanted to? Well, of course, he can snap it any time. Well, then why doesn't he? Because he's been trained, starting from a baby, that he can't break the chain. As the elephant grows up, it tries and tries, but the chain is too strong. The elephant gives up and never tries again, even when it is fully grown and massive and could snap the chain in the blink of an eye. Mentally, the elephant has been beat. Now let me introduce you to American human beings. These humans descend from ancestors that valued and cherished the mentality of liberty. But then the power-hungry, quote, mental trainers came along. One of these many trainers goes by the name of Michael Gerson. Incidentally, if that name sounds familiar, it's because I talked about him just last week. He's the former speechwriter for George W. Bush, and we were reading his quote on Obamacare that basically said the Republicans should create their own, quote, Obamacare to present as an alternative, not to try and defeat the unconstitutional one that we have now. He didn't actually describe it as unconstitutional. That's my word. He probably doesn't see anything wrong with defying the Constitution, much like just about everyone else in government. Constitution? Who cares? Sounds a lot like his boss, but he didn't care for the Constitution either. Anyway, getting back to the column, like his colleagues, Gerson recognizes the contempt that Americans currently have for the government. He sets out to reaffirm to the trained humans that they cannot break the chain. Gerson writes in the Washington Post, quote, Americans do not want public officials who share their contempt for government. They want public officials who no longer justify it. The alternative to the grandiosity and incompetence is not to do nothing. It is to achieve policy goals in ways that are practical, incremental, and effective. Americans have not ceased looking for responses to routine educational failure or persistent economic stagnation, or to the problems of an expensive, inequitable healthcare system. These are public challenges in which government plays an inescapable role. a successful political party will provide a superior conception of that role. So Mr. Gerson has no problem with government meddling around and trampling on individual rights. None at all. In fact, he states right here that the government plays an inescapable role in these policies that must be dealt with by government because you're too stupid and incompetent to do it yourself. Now, Mr. Rossini continued in his column, quote, "You see, American humans also start their training at a very young age. Government wants to make it even younger with its idea of universal pre-K. By the time the Americans are 18 years old, the idea that government plays an inescapable role in education, the economy, health care, and every other facet of life is cemented in. When adulthood is reached, American minds are ready to, quote, graduate to CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and the Michael Gersons of the world. Just in case Americans get curious about liberty, these trainers on television are there to provide a daily refresher course. As with elephants, this is all mental. The power rests solely on the ideas that are held by each individual. This is why I remind you at the end of every show I do, liberty begins with you in your mind. You are free if you will only take control of your life. Run for office. Get others to as well. Vote them in and start reining in this government. It works for you, not the other way around." Now, he also finishes his column with this. "Government does not have to play an inescapable role. Such an idea is equivalent to the tiny chain holding back the massive elephant. A much sounder, sustainable, and viable idea is for government to play no role whatsoever in education nor in the economy. The elephant merely has to jolt its leg to snap that puny chain, and he could gallop off to freedom. Americans just need to adopt different ideas. Then speak, write, tweet, YouTube, and share them with others, much like we do on this radio show. Americans can tell the mental trainers to take a hike and then set the country back on the path of peace, commerce, and no foreign entanglements." He's echoing exactly what you hear on this show each and every week. The ability to gain your freedom is within your reach. All you have to do is grab it. The government is depending on the constant reinforcement of the idea that you can't, so you might as well comply. Don't let them win that argument in your head. Don't sentence your children and grandchildren to more and more tyranny from an out-of-control and largely unaccountable government. This week, start making the changes in your life to steer our country back onto the course we lost over a century ago. Now you may say, "Well, Patrick, what can I do about all this?" It's simple, and as I just mentioned, if you're a regular listener to this show, you know what's coming. At this next election, you know someone who should run, and it might even be you. Don't worry about what others say. Walk around your district. Talk to people. Enlist them to help spread the word about what you want to do. If you don't make it this time, run again. And keep running until you win. Even if you never win, at least you'll be trying to make a difference. You're not going down without a fight. That's why I'm on the air. I'm trying to reach out to as many people as I can. I'm trying to get you to get active in managing your government. If you don't get involved, then people who want to run your life and ruin your life will. In fact, they already are. They want to tell you what to do, and they have the force of law to make you. You better start working this week to get good people to run for office and then work to get them elected. But it doesn't end there. As you know, you have to keep an eye on what they're up to, or they might end up being seduced by the money and power and government, just like we're dealing with now. You have to keep them honest or you have to throw them out. I mean, you wouldn't put up with this kind of stuff from employees in any other business you owned. Yet you allow it to go on with your employees in Washington. This constant lying, this condescension, the outright disrespect for you as their boss, their employer. You hire these people. You pay them. They answer to you. Make them do it. Hold them to account. Stop blindly voting for people just because they're Democrat or Republican or whatever. They're all people. They're all human. If you don't keep an eye on them, the odds are they're going to succumb to doing what Washington wants instead of what you want. Just look at the numbers. How many go to Washington and renege on their campaign promises? All right, we're already at the halfway point of the show today, the half-hour break. Wow. When we return in the next half hour, we'll talk some more about government and how it's abusing us and maybe give you some more ideas about what we can do to get this turned around. When we return here on the Patrick Riggin Show on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network.
I sailed away to China in a little rowboat to find you, and you said you had to get your...
Welcome back to the Patrick Riggin Show here on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network and News Talk 98.7 WOKI. This segment starting off, I had something I was wanting to get into, but before I get to that, I want to talk a little bit about this shooting in the airport in Los Angeles real quickly, since it's been on my mind a lot. Now, don't worry, we'll get back to what we're talking about here, but I've been asked about this shooting over and over since the news came out. I've also addressed this type of thing before, but I'll hit on it again here real quickly. This is just a dumb move by an ignorant person. If he's truly against what this government is doing, what the TSA is doing, this is exactly the wrong way to go about making your point. All he did was give the hysterical liberals and pro-government types more ammunition, not to use a pun, but more ammunition to use against the citizens of this nation. See, these anti-government people are crazy. They're running around shooting up the airport. They're trying to kill government people. We need to ban guns. We need to ban and censor this type of thinking. Of course, when the government overreacts and kills some innocent people, either in this country or abroad, none of these same people make any fuss about that. They aren't calling for the government to give up all of its weapons. They aren't calling the government crazy and out of control. You know, and let's just be honest. In all honesty, what is the difference between what this gunman did in LAX, in the airport, or the government killing innocent people around the world every day? The difference is we see it on television. We have news reports about what happened in Los Angeles. Our government killing a bunch of faceless people at a wedding party in Pakistan doesn't matter. But a lone gunman killing people in this country in an airport in Los Angeles does. Are we not all human? Are we not all not deserving? Are we not all deserving the same rights to life and liberty? In case you're wondering, we are. It doesn't matter if we live in America or Zimbabwe. All men are created equal with certain inalienable rights. Or so that's what we profess to believe in this country. No, killing another person in cold blood is never the answer. Not here, not in Pakistan, not anywhere. I don't care if it's a government or a lone gunman. No one deserves to be put to death simply because they're in the wrong place at the wrong time. We ask ourselves why we're having more killings and more murders by crazy people at random places. There are a lot of answers. One of the main ones is drugs, the prescription drugs a lot of these people are on. But I think another overriding principle is they're only following in the footsteps of their government or governments, since other countries do this as well. If our government is killing people right and left for questionable reasons, is it any wonder when some of the imbalanced people of a population, they don't see any problem with it as well? When we glorify and celebrate these killings on the news, when our president actually brags about being in on the decisions on what unsuspecting person gets the axe across the neck somewhere in this world, how can we glorify all of this violence and killing by our government and not expect the citizens to become jaded and unsympathetic to the rights of other humans? This is what we're fighting against on this show as well. This whole effort by governments to dehumanize us all. This wholesale disregard of basic human rights of everyone all around the world. Not just by our government, but by all governments around the world. It's way past time we start doing something about this. We see the symptoms of this disease. They're all around us. We simply have to stop our government in its tracks and get it turned around before it goes too much farther down the tubes. Yes, it's a problem in other countries as well. But when the citizens of England and France and Germany and Pakistan and India and Australia, people from all around the world, when they see the strides we start making in our country, that will embolden them to make the changes in their countries as well. It's like a lot of things. America is going to have to lead the way. And I really can't think of a better time to get started until right now, or like right now. But I wanted to get that in here about that shooting because I've had so many questions about that. Getting on, but let's see, we got a few minutes here. I'm going to try to hit this before we get out of this break here, or out of this segment, and we come up on the break. I guess kind of along these same lines, have you ever sat down and thought about how much we're putting up with on these encroachments on our freedom and liberty? This treating you as a child who can't take care of themselves. Now, take, for instance, and it's something we've talked about a lot on this show, you're driving on a public street or the interstate. Well, you can't be trusted to drive according to how the government thinks you should be driving. So they post this number and define a speed limit, and you're not supposed to drive above that speed. And if you do, the government will penalize you. Not that you've endangered anyone, not that you've caused an accident. You see, you notice there is no victim in this crime. You're only driving on a public road, a road you paid for, a road your tax dollars support, and you're driving on this public road at a velocity that violates the government's established rule. Now, how is that a crime? It's a violation of a government rule, that's it, nothing more. And you say, well, they're speeding, they could cause a wreck, and that affects me. So you're telling me the person who is able to drive over the speed limit and have complete control of their vehicle is more dangerous than the elderly person driving 5 miles per hour under the speed limit and can't keep their car in their lane. Can't hardly see past 6 cars in front of them, let alone hear an emergency siren. Now, some people just can't control the vehicle at the speed limit. Does that mean they should be driving much slower? We have a minimum speed on most interstates. Well, if they can't drive that speed safely, they're endangering your life there too. If this was a critical problem, then people would be demanding something be done. No, it's about revenue, and that's what it comes down to. If someone causes you to wreck, you can sue them. We have a victim. You're entitled to take that person to court and have a judge hear your case. You see, we've become this nation of laws when we used to be a nation of justice. Another example, if you want to abuse your body, you must do it in a manner approved by government. If you're doing cocaine, marijuana, or crack, you can't use those drugs because not approved ways of abusing your body. But liquor, cigarettes, even caffeine, now you can abuse those drugs. They're approved. So how is that justice? And here's the short answer, it's not. You can drink yourself to death, and the government couldn't care less. But if you take cocaine and overdose, well, the government still doesn't care, but should you be caught doing it, you'll be put in a cage until you can learn to obey government rules, until you can learn to abuse your body in ways the government approves of. Or, in my case, until you stop ending sentences with a preposition. Personally, that offends me much more than anyone's drug use. You see, according to the government, you're committing a crime, but you don't have a victim. Now, you may say society is the victim, but you can't have society as a victim. That just doesn't work. You need a human for victim. Only people can be victim, human beings. You see how, just with these really short examples, how we've become a nation of laws and not a nation of justice. I mean, is it justice to lock up someone if they're hurting no one but themselves just because they're taking a drug not approved by the government? Sure, they're breaking a law, but are they doing anyone an injustice? You see the difference between the two? That's what I want you to think about as you go throughout your life, for this week and your life. I don't want you to listen to this radio show and say, well, Patrick says it, so I'm going to adopt this view. No, I want to give you some ideas for you to ponder and think about, test them, argue with yourself, talk to your friends, your family, hash these ideas out and see what you like about them or what you don't like about them. But by all means, just think about it. Just don't accept it because you hear it coming from me or anybody off the radio. All right, we're up on the last break of the show this week. Unfortunately, this is a short segment coming up, but I have one or two more things I want to try and get to before we run out of time. Hold on through the next break, and we'll get going as quickly as possible here on the Patrick Riggins Show and the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network.
Around the lake tonight.
Welcome back to the Patrick Riggins Show here on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network. Yes, Bomb Iran. The regular listeners to this show know what that lead-in song means. We have more Iran news coming up this segment. Incidentally, I've received emails about that song asking who sings it. If you're wondering that same thing, I would make the classic Internet Usenet suggestion, Google is your friend. But for those of you not on speaking terms with that search engine, I don't know, maybe you've had a fight, maybe Google forgot your birthday one year, whatever the reason is, you don't use Google anymore. To those, I'd say, Bing is your buddy. No, really. This song, Bomb Iran, is by Vince Vance and the Valiants. So you can probably look that up on whichever search engine you use, and you can find that out there on the internet. The reason I ran that song coming in, though, is everyone's talking about Iran developing a nuclear bomb. Israel's talking about it. The United States is talking about it. The Middle East is talking about it. Everyone's saying if Iran gets a nuclear bomb developed, the world's going to end. You know, they said the same thing about Pakistan and India. If those two countries had nuclear bombs, then they would annihilate each other because of the Kashmir region. And if it wasn't for that, it would be something else. Hey, and don't forget North Korea. If they get a nuclear device, then they'll be using it on South Korea or Japan or maybe in the United States. We simply cannot allow them to have one either. Oh, wait a minute. That's right. They already do. And they haven't used it on any other country. So I guess we were wrong on that one, too. The question to ask yourself is, who's promoting this whole Iran can't be allowed to develop a nuclear device argument? Who keeps talking about it? Well, it's Israel and us, the United States, along with a couple of other of our allies and some anti-proliferation groups who need that grant money to, quote, study Iran's nuclear program. And who else is talking about it? Oh, yeah, Iran. But they're going to use it for leverage. They're not going to bomb anyone. And now you might be saying, now, Patrick, how do you know that? I'd say, my friend, that is why you listen to this radio show. Because the logic and reason you hear here on this show isn't matched anywhere else. The reason is I'm not blinded by rhetoric or party loyalty or misplaced patriotism. None of that affects me. That's why I can see through all this hype and pull back the curtain so you can too. To look at this logically, think about our country for a minute. We were developing a nuclear bomb and we kept everything top secret. Government built a whole city called Oak Ridge in Tennessee to work on this project. Everything was kept under wraps because we were developing this weapon to use against Japan. Now, whether that was a moral thing to do or not, it's an argument for a different show. The key to remember is we kept everything secret. Iran is practically selling tickets so the world can watch it develop nuclear technology for, quote, peaceful purposes. Now, why would they do this? Why would everyone know the secret? It's because they want something. They want respect. They want economic subsidies. They want technology transfers. They want something. And you can bet your life savings on it. If Iran was developing a weapon to use against Israel, no one would know about it until the thing went off over Tel Aviv. Iran's leaders aren't stupid, and their population is even smarter than their leaders, which isn't surprising because most citizens are more intelligent than the politicians running their country. But anyway, their leaders aren't dumb. They know lighting off a nuclear device in or over Israel will result in Iran being removed from the map. No two ways about it. In fact, the whole Middle East knows this same thing. Israel doesn't claim to have a nuclear bomb, but everyone knows they have them. And everyone knows they will use them if one's used against them and with devastating results. So Iran isn't looking to start a war that will result in its annihilation. It just isn't going to happen. If it was starting to look that way, you can bet someone close to the leaders is going to start taking them out. No one in the military wants their families being bombed or having to suffer through a nuclear holocaust. No one's going to stand by and allow that to happen, even if you have a crazy running the country. The minute it starts looking like Iran will no longer exist past next week, the military over there will start knocking on some doors to take over, or at least replace whoever's hell-bent on national suicide. So what's Israel's problem? Why do they want to attack Iran? Well, the closest example I could use that we would understand is Cold War hysteria. Israel sees in Iran a country that wants to eliminate its existence. And this is what Iran's leaders scream about. But that's all it is talk. If Iran was serious about setting off a nuke in Israel, there are plenty of ones you could probably pick up from the former Soviet republics. The Russians have admitted they can't account for every nuclear device out there. There's plenty floating around. So where are they? They're somewhere, yet none of them have been detonated. It's because these nuclear weapons used to be a deterrent, but now they're becoming a bargaining chip. Just like chemical weapons are in Syria and other countries around the world. When things start looking rough, when the going gets tough, you start preaching some crazy rhetoric, and the money will start flowing in to buy you off. This tactic was used by Yasser Arafat for decades. He died with money hidden all over the world. Money sent to him in order to bribe the PLO into leaving Israel alone. When he wanted more money, he rattled a saber and made some speeches about running Israel into the Mediterranean. Now, the numbers vary, but most organizations that have looked into his personal wealth put him at close to $1 billion when he died. $1 billion with a B. You see, having weapons and soldiers can pay off for a country if they're wanting to use them to get aid dollars from the international community. And that's mainly what they're doing. We are out of time already this week here on the Patrick Riggins Show. If you want more information about us, you can go to our Facebook page, which incidentally is over 12,000 people liking this show, already keeping updated on this show. And you can join them. Just go to facebook.com/Patrick Riggins Show and hit that like button on the page, and you'll kept updated as to what's going on here each week. That's facebook.com/Patrick Riggins Show. And you don't have to be a member of that Facebook. You can just go to that page. Also, youtube.com/Patrick Riggins Show is where our archives are located. And if you want to email us, patrickriggins@gmail.com, or you can drop us a card or letter here at WOKI. Remember, liberty begins with you in your mind. Join me next Saturday afternoon at 4. We'll be fighting for freedom, liberty, and the restoration of the Constitution. Thanks for listening, and have a great week.
As a dreamer of dreams and a traveling man, I have chalked up many a mile.
Join us again next week for a solid dose of truth on The Patrick Riggin Show.